Yes, I'll just stand up for the introduction. So, good evening. My name is Declan Smart. This is for the purpose of the tape, as I say in very good. Declan Smart from the School of Philosophy, and more than delighted to have Paul Mason here to do a talk. So you're probably wondering why I'm here, and to tell you the truth, I wonder that a lot myself. So by way of introduction to Paul, I will tell you why I'm here. So when I was quite early in the school, quite young in the school, I was very fortunate to have Mr. Mulhall as my tutor for a long time. It was fantastic, and I was very young and enthusiastic and a little naive, and had loads of questions, for Mr. Mulhall. As I came across the material, and as I got promoted in the school and got to the higher levels of the fancy sources of material, we moved past Plato and the Bible and Shakespeare, and we started to look at Eastern scriptures and the Gita and the Upanishads. But we also had these conversations with Shantanand Saraswati. So I had a lot of questions about Shantananda, who was the Shankaracharya. So with Mr. Mulhall, I had all sorts of questions. What was the Shankaracharya? How did he get elected? Did he get elected? What does the Shankaracharya do? Does he have a job? Would he come to Ireland? Mr. Mulhall said, philosophically we had the conversations, which I love, but biographically we didn't know a lot. So Mr. Mulhall said, find out what the back and let me know. So me being enthusiastic, that's what I did. So I went looking for material and information, and one of the things I came across was a book called Darshan, by a book of photographs, which had, now there's one out in the interview, which has Shantananda sitting on a throne, and what turned out to be the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi beside him. So the book is of Frank's 3 trips to India, and in 2 of them, Shantananda features. The book is really about the Maharishi. But I was delighted to get this. The only place I could get it was online, through a website run by a man called Paul Mason. That was in 2009. I was delighted to get the book and started a conversation with Paul over the internet. Actually, I hadn't met him in person before today, so... So since then, since 2009, we have been communicating. It turned out Paul was not just a website, but he also wrote the book about the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. Out of interest, have you all heard of the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi? Yes? Some of you may have seen him when he was in Dublin. He's George. Yes? Okay, came to Dublin. So, my interest wasn't so much in the Maharishi, it was really in Shantananda. And for Paul Mason, he had a big interest in the Maharishi, but also the Maharishi's tutor. So, in this picture, both Shantananda and the Maharishi are brother disciples. And the guru, if you like, or the teacher of both of them, was a man called Brahmananda Saraswati, or Guru Dev. And Paul would be the world-renowned expert on Guru Dev. So he has written several books on Guru Dev, so he's here to really talk to us about Guru Dev. Just as a very nice aside, in the course of my explorations, as I gathered up information, I was started to put it together into some sort of book. Just for my own use, and a few photographs from Darshan and a few tips, but I couldn't really get anything definitive. And then out of the blue, Paul sends me this book. He says, look, I have this book, he can speak Hindi, so I think it's about your guy, Shantananda. So it turned out that this book was written by a man called Vasudevananda while Shantananda was still alive. And it was a biography of Shantananda. Or it's really what would be called a hagiography, which is a biography written by a devotee. So I was chuffed, couldn't read a word of it, it's all in Hindi. And the story of the book is probably worth telling another night. But suffice to say that the school in London has, 15 years later, has it's about to publish a translation of that book as a proper formal book with a lot of additional material in it and some maps and photographs and so on, and it's fantastic. So I don't think anybody's seen this outside London up there. This is the only copy. I'm not allowed to let anybody see it except Paul. So that was my attempt at it. So that was how the conversation went with Paul. And over the years, I got more and more information. And some years ago, I thought that it would be a good idea for Paul to come to Ireland, maybe for Teachers' Day. So that was, Paul tells me, 7 years ago. 7.5. And it didn't work out for a number of reasons, and then COVID came. And then for some reason this year, the stars seemed to align, and Paul said, listen, if you still need me, I'm happy to come over. So I'm more than delighted to introduce you to Paul Mason, who's going to speak to us today. What Dr. Horan thought would be a good idea because Paul could talk for weeks and it would all be fascinating, and we'd all still be here. So just to maybe put some structure on it, and then I'll open it to the floor later on, if that's okay. So maybe just the first question, Paul, is if you could say a little bit about how you encountered the words and the teachings of Brahmananda Saraswati.
Okay, right, well, as an 18-year-old, I hitchhiked to India from London with no particular sense of purpose. It felt like a pilgrimage. I was brought up as Christian, and it felt like what I was going on wasn't a holiday. It felt like it was a pilgrimage, but I didn't kind of know what that meant. The 40 days and nights in the wilderness, but going with your Italian girlfriend, it's a bit incongruous. Well, eventually we got to India, and I wasn't quite sure what to do about the Indian experience. I was getting used to being on the road. And one of the ideas that came up, because I was a bit of a music enthusiast, was to go and see Adi Shankara, the sitarist. But he lived in Bombay. And that seemed quite a long way to travel. And I asked about the sort of mystical guy, the one with the hair and all the rest. And they said he was in Rishikesh. And I looked at the map and I thought, well, that's up the road. So it was expedient. I would have gone to see Ravi. I have actually met Ravi, but Maharishi one. And on my way up to see Maharishi, I thought, well, he's a philosopher. I didn't know he taught meditation. I thought, what have I got to talk about? And I thought, well, what I figured is that you can't be happy and unhappy both. That I had figured. And I thought that was a good subject to talk to him over a cup of cocoa about. And the other thing I thought of was, because I was a Londoner and I'd experimented, I found that by going through the no exit signs, that you always got out to the road much quicker. And I thought, is that some sort of metaphor, So these were the two things I wanted to discuss with this world-famous philosopher. And I went up to Rishikesh, and it was absolutely wonderful to be there. There was something special in the atmosphere. I could sense it, and I thought, this is special. And I thought, I'm going to stay here for a month. After all this travelling, it would be nice to settle down. And it was a holy village, Swag Ashram, with just ashrams, no hotels, no cars, no tourism other than the Indian spiritual pilgrims. And then, of course, we went up to see Maharishi's ashram. And it was wonderful going up there because there was butterflies everywhere, it's like thousands of butterflies. Is this good or what? And stumbled up the hill and was met by a German, which was a bit of a shock because you expect Indians to be in India. And he said, do you meditate? And I thought, what a cheek, of course I meditate. You can't hitchhike thousands of miles without meditation. I didn't know what he was talking about, obviously. And he then said, do you practice the meditation that we teach? I didn't know what he was talking about. And he gave me a leaflet about it and asked me to, come back and talk to Bevan Morris about meditation. I'll be honest, I wasn't very interested. I was disappointed that Maharishi wasn't there. He was in Canada or somewhere, and I felt it was a bit of a letdown. So eventually, we agreed to be initiated, but we forgot all about it. And we were catching a boat over to Rishikesh, and I suddenly said to my girlfriend, I said, we're supposed to be getting initiated, and we've got to get flowers and fruits and handkerchiefs, and it's like, oh God, stress, you know. So we got back off the ferry boat and went in search of, you can't buy flowers in India. They don't have florists. Well, in 1970 they didn't. They don't sell handkerchiefs. Yeah, we got the cloth ripped off by a cloth vendor. And Andreas, who was supposed to be my initiator, he was very put out that we didn't bring the flowers. So you pick some in the garden. I still remember exactly what it was about. But I went and learned meditation, and it was a mixed blessing. I was enjoying it, and yet I didn't feel it was easy as I was being taught that it was. It seemed to be a jet line way of sit down and you'll find God, whatever God is, like whoosh, just like that. And this was in the era where people could take drugs to get instant sensations, and you could have instant coffee. You didn't have to wait for anything. And I thought, oh yeah, okay, let's have this instant, I'm up for this. When I think about it, let's do this. And I was disappointed. And I thought, perhaps I don't fully get what I'm being taught, because I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, I've got to repeat this mantra. And sometimes the mantra would get fainter and I'd be just sitting there in a nice state of peace. But being in a nice state of peace wasn't like meeting the source of creative intelligence, God. They're not that easy to convince yourself, not as a first timer. And I thought, perhaps there's something I need to do. And I thought, well, I'm not thinking, so I don't need to be meditating. Perhaps if I just let go of thinking. I'm a bit naughty, but I'm going to try it. And I sat there and I listened, and I could hear like bugs clicking, and I could hear the gardener trimming like the roses in Maharish's garden. And I think, oh yeah, I'm just witnessing it. That was it. Whatever it is that you're supposed to get out of serious meditation, that's what happened. And I thought, it's ridiculous. What did I experience? I experienced the depth of just being, without being somebody, without being a thinker, without being... I wasn't even aware that I had a body. I wasn't aware of anything other than awareness itself, and it was a very pleasant experience. And then I started to think, and I started to sense my body. And I was quite excited at the proposition that I had a body. And, it all sounds a bit loony, but I'm only telling you the story because you're about it. And eventually Andrea said, and slowly we open the eyes after we stopped the mantra, and then slowly we open the eyes after 2 or 3 minutes, or whatever he was saying. And I thought, oh, there's somebody talking to me. And it's like, wow, where am I? And I opened my eyes, and I was shocked to see this German guy. And I was shocked to see my girlfriend. And before I'd gone in, you know what relationships are like. And it's like, all of a sudden I had it's like, there's Yolanda. Oh, it's great. It wasn't like complicated. It was like, there's a good friend, she's in the same room. And it was astonishing. The trouble is that subsequently, I started listening more and more to how you're supposed to meditate. And then my expectations got lowered, and I started just to do what I was taught to do as a routine without doing what I clicked in. But to be honest, it didn't matter because it had already had its purpose. They talked about having regular meditation. I couldn't see the point. It's like, well, I just did it. What are you talking about, a routine? And I was actually quite bothered about having to have a routine. And it felt like it was conservative. It felt like somebody was interfering with my day. Now, after this, you do this, and after that. And then when you get home, you sit down and say, it's like you're really being invasive. But I bought into it. And really, to come and answer your question properly, my association with Brahmananda, is that I thought, I'm going to watch this lot. I'm going to study them. I'm going to find out how meditation, because they're making all these claims that there's so many millions of meditations, I'm going to find out all about it. I'm going to find out how it affects everyday Joes and Jills and superstars, celebrities. I'm going to get to know everything about it, and I'm going to appraise this. It's a bit of a mad thing, but that's how I felt about it. I didn't want to prove them wrong, but I got a job to do, I felt. And a day or two later, I asked for a picture of Maharishi, and they gave me a black and white print, and I said, oh, could I have one of those? There was a tiny little picture of Swami Brahmananda Saraswati, whose face there was on the initiation picture. If I should have here, and I probably have another one. No, here it is. It's only little. The painting,
Yes.
the portrait.
Is this one here?
No, it's close, but it's like that. And I thought, who is that guy? It was something rather nice, rather austere, rather kind of like, but silent. It's on the other one. So, it's on that one.
This one.
See, I don't even know my own books. That is bad. I'm not. Stop this guy. I really don't know what's on them. And this is a community of sadhus and yogis. There's a couple of yogis there. I mean, like the bona fide jobbies, you know, the loincloth and the hair. And one of them was just so lit up. And that inspired me. It says that you can actually get lit up. Do you know, it's all very well everybody doing their yogas and standing in funny positions and talking about it. It's another thing where you actually meet someone. And it was one morning, this yogi guy arrived, and I thought, I'm going to invite him in for a cup of tea to the cafe. And I did. And I offered him a currant bun. I can't remember now whether he accepted the currant bun. You're really not interested whether he had the currant bun. But what you will be interested in is the fact that he talked in poetry. And I was quite impressed with that, because I like poetry, and I liked the lilt and his whole majesty of talking. And I can remember some of the things he said. It's not necessarily a good time to say it, but it was very worshipful, his poetry. And I couldn't believe this guy. Gradually, all the local kind of people were gathering in the tea house, wanting to get in on the action, get in this kind of theatre of yoga. And he's saying to me, oh, you come and I teach you Hindi. And I say, I cannot be with you. I'm finding it difficult enough to be 15 minutes with a high wattage luminary like you. You think I can sit around and learn Hindi from you? It ain't going to happen. And before we left, he said, oh yeah, I was in Kashmir. He said, it was a little bit chilly, he said. He said, people were dying. Here's a guy who goes around naked all the time, just wears a loincloth to look respectable. I say, it's something else. And for the next 30 years, that gave me inspiration. That gave me inspiration to kind of think, keep doing your program, keep meditating. And it wasn't just that. I mean, I've always found meditation quite useful. It settled me down, it mellowed me out, it got me composed. And even if I was uptight, I become less uptight. If I had a domestic argument, and I said, look, I'm going to go meditate now, I wouldn't even remember that we'd been having an argument unless, the wife would sort of say, and it's like, oh dear, yeah, I do remember. So, what were we arguing about? So, clearly there was something kind of tangible and useful. But you asked me, how did I come to get to grips with Brahmananda's teachings or find out about them? Well, it was a complete mystery. Maharishi's movement had the funds to translate everything that he'd ever said. They have an incredible amount of resources, and they're always videoing Maharishi and recording him, and so why didn't they do that? And I discovered over the years that it was actually Maharishi, whilst he was working in the ashram, that did all the publicity about Gurudev.
Maharishi was the disciple of Gurudev at the time?
He was his clerk.
His clerk.
Okay, he was his sort of unofficial secretary eventually, and then he became a brahmachari. So yeah, it was his master. They used the word master, but I think that's a special word, which is saying he worked for him, but for free. Okay, so Maharishi, other than myself, Maharishi is the only person to really put his back into promoting Gurudev's teachings, and I've done it purely for information purposes. I actually went back to India after the hitchhiking business, and I took a jet, I went Air India. It's like unbelievable to actually get on an airplane and sit there and not hitchhike through Turkey and Iran and all the rest of it. And I went up into the mountains and I tried to track down where Gurudev had spent his time, where Maharishi had spent his time. And it was quite a Duke of Edinburgh's award challenge, I was on my own. There was no maps in those days. It was a very heavily guarded secret, the location of all this area. And I had my work cut out to find out about anything. It's a whole story in itself. But eventually I got to Jyotirmath, which is where the monastery was, and the guy who was in charge of the hostel where I was staying, I found him in the morning reading a Hindi book with Gurudev's face on the front. I could not believe it. I've hit gold. He's reading a book by the very person that I want to know about. So I challenged him about it. He said, I take you there, my friend's working there. So is that an Italian accent or an Indian? Perhaps he was part Italian. Can't get that right. So went up to the ashram and actually found two books. One, the life story of Gurudev, and the other one, the Upadeshamrit, which is like 108 satsangs or Upadesh. So immediately, being rather impulsive, as you might have gathered already, I said to myself, I'm going to learn Hindi and find out what these, and translate them and share them with the world, whether the world wants to know or not, which was very impulsive of me, and I had room for regret afterwards, because it meant that I not only had to learn Hindi well enough to translate it, I also had to learn a certain amount of Sanskrit in order to deal with the frequent quotes that he would make in Sanskrit. So that was a lot of work, and then I didn't. Unlike any other mortal, I just get on with the next thing. I was working and I can't be bothered. And then it hit me that I hadn't fulfilled that, and I thought, that's really not the way to go. You say you're going to do something, why don't you just do it? And I thought, well, fair enough. Okay, I have these dialogues with myself. And I got going, and the result was I started to generate these translations. At first I put them online and people reacted and sort of said, I think maybe that word means so-and-so. So it was quite interactive. And I had an audience, which helps you when you're working, when you know that somebody's going to look at it at 4 o'clock. And it's like, get that ready for that reaction. Not an adrenaline rush, but a reaction, a response. So then, of course, I went back to India again. Then I found another book. So I thought, oh, God, now I've got 3 books to do. And that's it, okay? Yeah, that is it. So that's the 3 books. And then I got into emailing. This guy wrote to me, and like, he's the son of one of the Guru's bodyguards. You know, we see these pictures of them sitting around with rifles. It all looks rather demonic. But I think it's like, oh, would you like me to help? I could borrow a gun and I could get hold of a uniform. I think it was pretty kind of like, whoa, flaky. And he was one of the bodyguards, and his son wrote to me, and we got some traction. And I said that, I don't know what I said, maybe I said I'd send him one of my books or something, but he sent me, because there'd always been this like one title that I couldn't make sense of when I saw a list, you know, and I'd only ever read it once on a mimeographed list. And it's like, I don't know what that book is. And I said it to him. He said, oh, I send you a copy. Right. This is like the rarest book by this teacher.
By Guru Dev, by Brahmananda.
Yeah, and he sent it to me. So what did I do when I got it? I scanned it and put the files all up on the internet so everybody can have it. It's my nature. I think you people here call it seva, where you share, you give, and that's a part of your doctrines. And it's definitely a part of mine. And it's also an enthusiasm. It's like, how can you enjoy something if you can't like reach out and say, hey, do you want one? And the internet's like free, you know. It's like you can share stuff without any great cost. I mean, I pay a website fee, but I mean, I run my website, don't get me wrong, but I have to pay for the server and stuff.
And that's the book you're translating, you're publishing at the moment?
I'll come to that. So I'm translating that book, not because I want to. I've gone off the boil by this time. It's like, yeah, okay, I've done that job. I'm not a martyr. I want to get back into music, because my first passion, apart from chocolate and fudge, is music. Okay, so, but there's something clicking at me. It's like, yeah, but you like translating, don't you? It's like some people like word puzzles and crosswords and so forth. And it's like, yeah, I do like translating. And I say, you never did do that book. You started it, didn't you? And okay, I'll do it slowly. I'll do it when it suits me. And then I found that there were pieces of it that I really couldn't get my head around, and I slumped. But while I was doing it, I wrote a very lengthy introduction, because I felt you can't just give this information to people. You have to say something about it. You have to set a mindset. Like, why is he saying this? Who is this directed to? So my foreword, which started obviously, as anybody will, with one word, grew and grew and grew until it was as big as the book. That was brilliant. And I thought, well, this isn't going to work to have a, you know, you can have a lengthy forward, but you can't go that far. And I thought, slice it, leave the translation book as one, and then write this other book. And I made that decision, I think, about over 2 years ago. And I formulated the book that I'm writing now, which is that forward. It's now 33 chapters. And yeah, it's quite big. And it's kind of taken over a bit, you know. I mean, I still have all my interests. I've still got guitars, and I go out for walks, and I talk to people, and I collect all sorts of crazy things. Do you want to know about it? I collect old fag packets. I collect old original comic artwork from the Bash Street Kids I bought the other day. How many people do you know has got original Bash Street Kids? I have them. So it's like I like to balance my sort of spiritual side with just being completely brainless and just getting on and enjoying my life. And that suits my wife, because she doesn't trust me if I talk too much like spiritual things, you know. She doesn't trust people who talk too much like that, and she's very reassured when I can say sort of ordinary things. And so that's a good balance, and she's very supportive. So that's what I'm doing now, and I think that whilst I've been working on it lately, I've had a kind of lot of coincidences in as much as the information that I've been writing about, I've kind of like gone, oh, I really need this, or I wonder what to put in there, and it suddenly happened. And I know that sounds like religious testimony. It should be, you know, God be praised at that point, but it happens so frequently, you know, virtually every day, that I can't help but feel that I'm doing something right, and that I never took Gurudev as a guru. I took him as an intellectual exercise, a challenge, and I feel that in a funny sort of way, you know, we're working together. Does that answer you?
That answers the question. And across from us is a picture of Shantananda Saraswati, who you know very well, who Brahmananda introduced as a sannyasin. So Shantananda took Gurudev as his guru. But before that happened later in his life. In the school bookshop, I don't know if any of you remember, we had there was a little book called The Whole Thing, The Real Thing, and Strange Facts About a Great Saint. So these are two books. That's how I came across Gurudev in the school. So Paul has done a translation of the source of these. And in it, it describes the early life of Gurudev as a child, where he turns to a spiritual life. So maybe you could say something short about that, Paul.
Simple. He wasn't like other kids. He was very recluse. He was very deep. He followed the model of some Indian saints. In as much as he was very introspective, he was very ahead of his time. He would debate philosophical concepts. He was deadly serious. I think he was a difficult child for his parents, you know. He wouldn't play with toys and stuff, you know. I was really completely dissimilar. But he was reclusive. I think that's the word. He didn't want to join in. And when he realised, as so many children did in those days, that he was being lined up for a child marriage, that his was being arranged, he ran away from home. He became a runaway. Now, when we talk about runaways, I mean, I was a runaway for a few days because I didn't like school. But we do it in a different way. We get told off. You know, why did you do that? Where did you go? You shouldn't be enjoying yourself when you should be at school. You know, so my perception of a runaway and what he actually did, totally different. He walked along the River Ganges and tried to get to the mountains, to the Himalayas. This is one severely sincere cookie.
At what age?
9 years old. And they put out an APB, you know, like, where is this boy? Get him back, da-da-da. And the first policeman who got that note, who found him, didn't turn him in because he was so convinced about the truth of what he was saying, because he engaged him in debate and it completely crumbled. It's like, how do you do this? So he was eventually found by somebody who was less lenient and wanted, I think, reward, and you can't blame him for that. So he was shipped off home and back to his parents, and the Pandit tried to prove that he had to become a householder, you know. And then took him on in debate. And he couldn't win either. And the mum overheard the Pandit's opinions of the boy and was totally convinced that he had to be free. And so she gave him permission and she said, don't ever become a begging sadhu. If you ever feel like coming home, do so. Wow. And that's what his dictum was for the rest of his life. He would never take money from anyone. He took his mum a bit serious. Seriously, how can you do that? he had a respect for his mum.
Fantastic. And his life then as a sannyasin, so he turned to the monastic life and became a sannyasin?
He looked around in the Himalayas. He found, as I did, like lots of interesting people. But eventually he found a guru. He found then Swami Krishnanand, who was like a lifetime celibate, and that's what they do. They're very monastic, they're very male, and they're very serious about their spiritual disciplines. And then the kid joined him and became a brahmachari and went into severe discipline and was successful. I gave out you've given out notes?
Not yet.
You haven't given them out. I thought they were going to read them ahead of time. Okay, well, okay. Can I read one of them? I thought everybody would be primed. Yes. I'm not even going to be able to see them because my goggles are upstairs.
Well, people can maybe read them at the end.
I think that's better. But basically, the endeavour of yoga isn't some pointless exercise, some sort of scientific experiment. It's about feeling wonderful. And he as a sadhu, he hadn't yet become a sannyasi, he was cooking some chapati, a roti, on a tava. Now, we buy a tava in a shop. He didn't buy a tava, he made one out of stone, a slither of stone, which he lit the fire underneath and was cooking the roti. And the stone the sound started splintering a bit. And he says it triggered off, his heart rose in waves of bliss. It's like he was so ecstatic at being alive. And he said anybody who was watching would have thought that I was some Paramahansa or some Avadut. But he said, no, this is Jiva Mukti. This is the individual in a state of freedom. So he got what he wanted. And then he became a sannyasi, which means like you become a part of the order of a monkhood and you go around with a staff, which hand I don't know, and you dress that way and you follow certain monastic rules. But at that point, he was free. And that's the message, really. It's about inner freedom.
And then later in life, Paul, in his 70s, he assumed the role of Shankaracharya of the North, which by all accounts had been vacant for 165 years. So that seems to have been a very significant event.
It seems to have been offered to him much, much, much earlier. Much, much earlier. He was anointed Shankaracharya in 1941, on the 1st of April 1941. But it seems that he'd been offered in 1908. So my not coming here for 7.5 years is completely banjacked by that one. Because he really took his time,
He turned it down.
What use did he for a job like that? It's like he didn't. I'm not saying he was work shy, but he didn't want to be As a Shankaracharya, I don't know if you guys are aware, a Shankaracharya isn't just like a priest or a great thinker. He's a very specific, important being. He's supposed to personify Adi Shankara. Adi Shankara set the whole thing in motion, allegedly sometime about 600 BC, although some people say it was AD. But the monasteries say it was about 600 BC, all four of them. They've got varying dates, 500 and something BC, all of them. So it's a great responsibility because you're stepping literally into his shoes. Not only are you called that, but you are that. And Adi Shankara, according to Hinduism, was an incarnation, the only incarnation of the goddess Lord Shiva, who just coincidentally, I have on my case because I thought this was too black. I put it on like yesterday or the day before, and I thought, oh, that needs a sticker. So Lord Shiva, the god of yogis, has got a meditation, if you want it. One for the cameras. So it's quite a responsibility. The thing is that you're the personification of Adi Shankara. You're not just some wiseacre who's saying a few smart remarks and people go, oh, that was clever. It's like, no, you are actually supposed to be him. You're supposed to be the living legend, as it were. You abandoned your own individuality. And I know that you guys are going to sort of say, what did Gurudev teach? What did Swami Brahmananda teach? He taught Adi Shankara. That's what he did. And he made a point of it again and again. He said, I do not speak my own opinion. So arguably, us being cynical, we could say, well, we never did know what he had to say. But 100%, he said the Indian traditional thinking, and he was more of a proponent of traditionalism in every sense than anybody alive since.
And in fact, thank you. And the lineage then from Shankara to Brahmananda, and we have it now through Shantananda and his successors. So Brahmananda had a number of disciples, but he made a will as to who was to succeed him on his death.
He made two wills. He made a will in, I think it was 42, in favour of Swami Kalpatri, his first disciple. But Swami Kalpatri got more and more interested in politics. And you can't blame him. This is like a country that Britain's running. You know, it never happened to Ireland, did it? So they're kind of touchy about the British. And there's like this incentive, this idea of quit India, they say. And Swami Kalpatri, although he's supposed to be a spiritual dude, he's supposed to be like the number one Swami. He was a real activist, like sincerely, and he did a lot of prison time. And he set up his own political party. It's not what you do as a Swami. I mean, you know, it's completely uncharacteristic of the tradition. And Gurudev tackled him about it and said, well, you know, like, want you to be Shankaracharya? And he said, I don't want to be. So Gurudev had to change that will. And in fact, that will was destroyed. I believe it was set light to. I like doing that. Paperwork, you know, it's like there's no coming back from that. You can't piece it together. It's great. So
Brahmananda chose Shantananda to be his successor.
Did. He had a lot of disciples, but Shantanand had come to him, I think in 4950, he'd gone to see him as the Shankaracharya. He'd gone up there, hoofed it up to go and make a visit to get his darshan. In India, these people, it's considered very, very, very auspicious to go and see a spiritual master and to actually just look at them and be in the same space. It's not quite something British, but it's something terribly Indian. And darshan is not just about holy men, darshan is about any important person. And he'd gone to see Brahmananda, so there was a connection there. There was an interest, but as your book tells you, he had his own guru. And as that book that's been translated has it, that guru was assassinated. I don't know the details. I'm pretty good at fluffing over things. I don't think I need to know about that. But it wasn't nice, apparently.
No.
Not at all. So then it came to him in a dream. His former guru came to him in a dream saying, "You should go and become sannyasi under Swami Brahmananda." And so he did. He went to see Swami Brahmananda in 1951, was it? 50, I think. He went to see him in Prayag, in Allahabad, and Gurudev gave him the runaround, because you don't just say, "I want," and then the guy said, "Okay, we'll do it." It's like this Guru Chela, this Guru Shiksha business, there's a lot of jiggery-pokery and there's a lot of commitment. If you're going to do that, you're not going to change your mind 2 or 3 years later. And Gurudev had said, we've had problems with various people. They wanted to change back, So he gave him the runaround, and Shantanand was completely unwavering, and he said, "Have I," because he initiated him in some way, and he said, "Have I become?" He said, "No, just think it in your mind that you have." And so he did for a while, and he lived with that, and he became an initiate, and he spent time with Gurudev. I mean, he spent a good deal less time than, say, Maharishi had. Maharishi was with Gurudev for 12 years, but then he was working for him, and doing all these transcripts and printing and that. Whereas there was something very special about Shantanand insofar as he had that sincerity, he had that bhakti, and he was fully with that. For many years he'd been like that. He was a recluse, and he'd worked at the Gita Press. The Gita Press is a big publishing house in India. It was very powerful in trying to get publications, not just the Gita, but it got millions of copies of the Gita in circulation. But there was a very strong, passionate pro-Sanatana Dharma. This whole idea of, let's rediscover our cultural heritage. And in some ways, it was a surprise that Shantanand was chosen, because he wasn't the longest serving. And that's what caused the disputes afterwards, that the politicking was about trying to sort of say, well, he hasn't been here as long as us. But we've all been at work when that's happened, and that's not the criteria. If somebody's better suited to a job, it doesn't matter that Zach's been here 20 years, it's like, how lucky, And that was the ill will, and that's followed, if it's on the internet and you find out the history, you find out there's been all sorts of gremlins. And people sort of say, oh, if they're spiritual, why would they be arguing? Do you know what? I don't think Shantanand ever argued about it. I've never found any evidence for him being a pain in the butt about it. He was just strong enough. I'm absolutely astonished at how strong he was to withstand the criticisms and the constant erosion right to the time that he retired, right to the very day that he retired. I think he was an astonishing man, and as I was mentioning to you, Declan, and to you, David, that I would like to sort of refix that history. I'd run a web page, a Facebook page dedicated to Swami Brahmananda, and I've been putting a lot of posts about Swami Shantanand lately, pointing out stuff that people didn't know. And, it's, as you said, I could talk all night. That's enough matter.
So our connection, if you like, with Shantananda and his teacher Brahmananda is really through Mr. McLaren taking up meditation and going to India and following on from the lead from Dr. Rolls from the Study Society.
That's correct, yeah.
So when Dr. Rolls was in India, he met the Maharishi, but the Maharishi was meeting his guru Shantananda.
Just out of interest, that was at that time. This picture was probably taken by Rolls, and this is Shantanand, and this is Vishnu Devanand, who was his
successor.
younger disciple, and this is my buddy, Dandy Swami Narayanan. I say my buddy because I'm kind of proud. I was very lucky to meet him, and I was very lucky that he took the attitude of respecting that in my own funny way I was all right. But you know, unless you wear a robe and put tapioca or whatever it is, like how can you expect to impress anybody? And I just went to see him just in casual clothes and chatted with him, and he seemed fine by that.
Right. Excellent. So that probably takes us to the point where Shantananda succeeds Brahmananda as Shankaracharya, and the school has made contact. And I have 100 questions, but I'd be maybe 20 minutes left. I'd be very happy if there were any questions from the audience, if there's anything you want to ask.
Can I ask one of them? I'm going to ask myself, what was the crossover? And I've got some of the copies of their ashram newsletter, the Shantanand newsletter. And I know that as soon as he became Shankaracharya, he was giving spiritual advice, spiritual ministrations. And what I found really exciting was I was translating a couple a few weeks back, or a few days back, whatever. And I saw him quoting Swami Brahmananda. So it's not like they're different. It's you know, Gurudev chose him because he favoured him carrying on the lineage. It's not that he then was somebody else. He did a lot of quoting of Gurudev. And in fact, I was talking to David earlier. I found 2 videos, Hindi videos, of when Swami Shantanand transferred, he retired. And on both of those, he quotes Gurudev. And it's like, wow, he's still talking about him in 1980. You know, so there isn't any distinction. You know, for him, it sounds like with the school and everything, he's been the guy of contact, but they're all one.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I have noticed that in recent years, Paul has become more interested in Shantananda, and he doesn't bypass anymore. He translates, and I think some material in one of his new books will contain a lot of that information.
Yes.
Yeah. So, if anybody has a question now, I might repeat as Paul's a little hard of hearing, so as you want. Temporarily, yeah. So, just put your hand up, and whatever the question is, I'll pass it on.
So is there still some controversy now with the latest Shankaracharya inherits the lineage or whatever? Will that continue on?
Lily was just asking about the current status of the Shankaracharyas. There has been many occasion of controversy in the past. Is there still some controversy?
Just a bit.
Just a bit.
But you need to kind of put it into perspective. There doesn't have to be a Shankaracharya of Jyotirmath. We get our inspiration where we get it. And in the modern world, you know, you can have e-books, you can have tape recordings, you can have MP3s. We're in a different media age, and you no longer have to traipse up to the mountains to get Guru Darshan. I've got a film on YouTube of Gurudev's, and I put on a soundtrack with him talking and laughing. So, you know, people can go and share that. I think that there's been a kind of almost an obsession in some people's minds with the idea that we need Shankaracharya of Jyotirmath, and that might well be true, but it's been so politically charged. It's been so unpleasant. In a way, it's almost a relief to know that there's no official one. And that's not got anything to do with Vasudevanand. Vasudevanand is respected in several organizations. He responds to them. He works with them. It doesn't have to be called that, indeed. I would have said.
Yeah, indeed.
It's not essential. I mean, Gurudev never wanted to be Shankaracharya. Think about it. He didn't leap at the chance. 1908 to 1941. I didn't mention when he was approached in 1908 that the Prime Minister of Nepal was hunting a man-eating tiger. And he'd gone to this area to hunt the tiger and shot the tiger. But the tiger had escaped, wounded, but it escaped. And they tracked the tiger down and they found that he was with some hermit in the jungle and who was actually washing the wound and sympathizing and telling the tiger to be peaceful and to live a life of peace and washing its wound. And these guys just couldn't believe it. It's like, that's a man-eating tiger and he's soothing it and washing it. And when they came to speak to him, he wouldn't talk to them. I think he was in a vow of silence at the time, because they came back from Nepal to have another go, another crack at talking to him, and they brought the most famous pundit of Nepal, and he asked all sorts of philosophical questions. It's one of those historical things. It's like, oh, blah, blah, blah. And he answered. It was like, how did you know that? And he went through and he got all these answers to questions that he'd never got answers for before. And then he wrote a letter in the Nepal press about it. And he also wrote to the people with the problem of no Shankaracharya, saying, I found him. But he wasn't interested.
Thank you. Thank you, Lily. There you go. Any other question? Mary?
Well, do you consider yourself a devotee of the Shankaracharya or any Shankaracharya?
Do you consider yourself a devotee of any guru?
Yes. I've already said I am not that keen on gurus because we're not brought up to it. I mean, I had difficulty enough treating my father as a guru because we didn't have that relationship. I was independent. I grew my hair. I did what I wanted to do, and I broke rules. So I found it very difficult to get into the role, to accept this idea of gurus, whereas Indian people, it's like just a point of reference. It's God, Guru, and one are the same. Yeah, really? That was quick. God, Guru, and oneself are the same. It was like, I don't know, I wouldn't trust these guys, I don't want somebody telling me what to do. But the strange thing is, in answer to your question, over the last year, I've had such a close working relationship with Gurudev, now that's quite a statement, that I think we get on very well. Did I say that?
You said earlier it's as if you're working together.
Yes, I don't think there's a discrepancy. I'm totally on my own page. I would definitely bow my head. I would definitely kneel to him. I would definitely be deferential. But I can't say I agree about everything. I mean, it's like we just brought up in a completely different culture. And I think that's an important thing to understand about what we're doing, is that we're looking at representatives of a different culture. From birth, they're told about the deities. From birth, they're told about the history of their own culture. they're told about transmigration. It's like you were here before, or you've been here many times, or you haven't obtained moksha yet. It's like, I was never told that. It's like if you eat your greens, you'll grow up and be able to kick a ball properly. We come from different cultures, and I think we're always in danger of getting overly fascinated with foreign cultures. I've watched a lot of Chinese drama over about a year or so ago, and I got transfixed with it. It's like, this is the real stuff. The legend of Shen Li is like, I think 49 episodes. It's a dream. But of course, you don't end up Chinese. You don't end up believing. And they're always fighting, aren't they? So yeah, I've got reservations. I think we need to absorb all the good things that we receive, wherever they come from. Mm-hmm. And I reserve the right to get them out of Beano comic, I told my first publisher that was going to be my next story, the real Dennis the Menace, So I know it sounds frivolous, but I kind of mean it. I think a lot of spiritual types end up a little bit kind of lost in their funny ways. I'm not referring to anybody here. Just my kind of impression of kind of Californianism a little bit, and some people are a bit over the top, And I think we need to remember what we were embarked on. And I've been reading over the last 24 hours or so remarks made by Gurdjieff, by Ouspensky, and kind of, yeah, exactly. They all got the right intention. And they weren't saying, let's wholesale take down a whole culture and accept everything, whether we like it or not. They were very discriminating minds. And, I was impressed.
Thank you.
You're married, you get. So, yes, hi.
Just I'm struck by this idea of the what we know Shankaracharya on the period of time.
Yes.
And tries to bring that back to our culture or even another Eastern culture. If it's animal not going to have a diet and there wasn't an range, that he was prominent. There's a Pope in our case, and there wasn't one that produced strong students will that be with them. And I'm not saying that it's problem. I know I just resulted.
Okay.
But to keep production going, you not need these initiators.
The question is really in relation to the role of the Shankaracharya. Is it necessary to have a Shankaracharya as a leader? Is it at all like the Pope in the Catholic tradition, for example? And how do things work when there isn't a Shankaracharya?
Well, and to answer that, I need to wind back. There was clearly a period where you contested that there was 165 years of no Shankaracharya. But all sorts of people called themselves Shankaracharya in that time. I've got press cuttings of that fact. So people just do what they want. That's the truth of it. And they use it as a badge of authority. Do you know? I mean, just to play a game here, if I'd have brought along an orange sheet or a white sheet and thrown it around myself and put a tilak on, how would you see me? There's some power in that. There's some, using symbols. And using the symbol of authority of the Shankaracharya is very, very powerful. That's why Kopatri wanted it, because it would support his politics. And it's not the same as teaching spirituality. It's not the same as explaining to people how they can turn within and let the sun come out within themselves. That's spiritual message. And if there's nobody doing it, then it's better that there's nobody in that role. Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
I'll do more if you want.
No, that's great.
Well, if you keep open to one, the top the episodes.
Thank you.
So, namely, we have Dr. Kirsky an article in 1945 about the inner Hintergarten. Have you heard of that? Or
This is a question on relating to what Brahmananda said after the Second World War about
yeah.
real victory.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. The SES have a translation of it. It isn't 100% accurate. I don't know who made it.
Yes.
I should caution you on that. But it's pretty on the ball. It's talking about the inner enemies.
it's authentic. It's authentically Brahmananda. That's it.
That translation, while you say it's not a 100% accurate translation, that is about what Brahmananda said at the end of the Second World War about real victory.
Yeah.
It's authentic.
Yeah, it's a genuine quote. It's actually, I'm not pushing my book that I haven't yet published, but it's part of the missing book. It was in the missing book. And I can share my translation, I can share the original text. So for those people who want to read the original text in Hindi, stroke Sanskrit, I'll give them that, and I'll give them my translation. How's about that? I'll send it to you.
Michael's one of our Sanskrit scholars, so
Wow,
yeah,
it's wonderful. I mean, I have to unpick. I don't say translate. I have to unpick Sanskrit because I don't. I've had a bit of run-ins with a guy who's an authority on Sanskrit, and I don't think he's up to spec. You know, he's translated a specific. It's very famous, and that's what really is galling, that he's relied on. People automatically, but he's so wrong in his translation, and I've called him out about it. And but what it's trying to say, essentially, I said, it's not saying that, buddy. That's your interpretation. And I would have thought somebody who's classically trained should stick to translation or say, this is my interpretation. But no, it'd be a pleasure to dialogue. And also about this one that I'm talking about, because I quote it in this little leaflet you're going to get. The Yogash Chittavriti Nirodha. It's the most famous sutra. I was talking about it with David. And it's the most important one. And there's this guy being a clown about it. It's really annoying. Sorry, I should shut up because the camera's on.
We've a few more minutes. Michael and Rutger, I'm sure, we have very strong Sanskrit scholars. Would love to, I'm sure, engage with you on that.
Well, if they translate it, that would be great. You know, because 108 more people have translated that. But you live in that ethos. Mm-hmm. You kind of think in that ethos. It would be interesting how you translated it. I tried to translate it like it was actually written, which I think is like not the intention these days, because what people use translations for is to forward their thinking. Things go better with gas. You say it doesn't say that. Yeah, but things go better with gas. You know, it's so bendy and not right.
Okay. So maybe Michael, cup of tea tomorrow with Paul would be great. So is that okay? So I think, like I said, we could go on for much longer. We're very grateful. Paul is actually going to come to the other half of the senior level, the residential.
And say exactly the same thing.
I'm sure it'll be completely different.
Yeah, I think so.
So if we're okay to end it there. Thank you all very much for your